Hey everybody, it's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily.
Hmm.
And whoops, wrong way. This is Fisher. So welcome to tonight's episode. We were just kind of laughing off the air if we should edit the show, because to be honest, by this point we usually have our guests backstage, and to be honest, it's going to be a surprise to see if Brad is here. So we've talked to him earlier in the week, and we know that he's doing well, so I guess I'm not worried about him. But I guess, as usual, we'll start with our fishing report and see where we go from there. But I guess, what do I do? Put you on the spot and say, like, it's been 2 weeks since we've even been here with people. So to everyone who is joining us, welcome back, because we had a vacation 1 week, and then last week we just had all kinds of life going on, working and all of that back and forth. So I guess, do we start by talking about our vacation? Where did we go?
Let's start a little bit more recent, then we'll backtrack. So, it's easier to remember stuff that isn't 2 weeks old now. Maybe. But no, we came back, and it was warm, and then it was cold, and then it was warm again, and
going into last weekend, people were calling it a cold front, and I don't know if it was cold enough to call it that. Do you think it was?
Yeah, we went from 90s to 70s. I think that's
well, then there
20
you go.
degrees. I don't know. She's wearing a sweater. It's 65 degrees.
Yeah, but it's about to be 90 again tomorrow.
But so we came back and we were, we were surprised. Hey, Scotty.
Oh, State Fair. Tell us about that. I'm interested.
But yeah, so we came back. We were kind of surprised. One of our lakes that we've been fishing a lot this summer, we came back to a little bit more stained water. It has been pretty clear, and then we got a little bit of algae bloom, which is fine. It's it wasn't gross or anything. It's just normal summertime stuff. The weeds had grown up a little bit, so that was kind of nice to see, in the fact that normally we're used to fishing pretty heavy weeds. And the problem with this lake is that there isn't any one like patch. Like, there isn't a wall of like a weed line or anything. There's like a patch here and a patch here and a patch here, all at the same depth, but the patches come all the way up to the top of the water, and they mat a little bit. So it's we had to switch up a little bit, and we figured with the cold weather that we'd go fish deep, and we did find some fish out on cribs, right? You were throwing some pretty fun baits from that Widowmaker Lures has, some prop jigs and whatnot. I stuck to the traditional droppers in a bigger size because it was a little bit windy when we got back.
Well, and I guess, I guess I don't intend to make this show about crib fishing because it's not even quite that season, but I guess that was a really interesting pattern, because when we first got there, and we looked at the cribs on their graph, it looked like there might be fish on there, but like, kind of who knows? And so we kind of tried it, and the first day we had a lot of wind, and we found that the crappies really were turning on. Well, first of all, we expected bluegills. And I guess that's the thing, is crappies turned on kind of as the sun was setting. Mm-hmm. And it was funny. Josh called it. He's like, wouldn't it be funny if the sun like hits the tops of the trees and then crappies bite, and then like however long later, and that happened, and then it happened.
Yeah.
But I think the other key to that was using the right bait, because at that point you had been using something that was a little bit more of a bug type plastic, mm-hmm. I think a little bit smaller. And I had just done the opposite. I had just upsized to kind of more of a minnow profile. And so to have that crappie bite on that minnow was a huge piece of that puzzle. And I want to say that as the sun started going down too much, kind of that bite dwindled off. So it was kind of a fast window that we just mm-hmm. happened to catch. But the funny thing about that lake is we went back the next day. We just like it, and it's not too far from home. So we went, and there was, well, in some cases, zero wind. So very much different conditions from the day before. And so when we looked at the different baits and tackle that we were using, It was quite a bit different because we got to use different stuff. So the day before, it was some of those Widowmaker because it had that tungsten capability, you know, a lot of weight and a small profile. But when there was no waves, yeah, I was able to switch it out to actually some things that I typically use in ice. A prop jig by Widowmaker. It's just exactly what it sounds like. It's a little, it's actually a vertical profile, but at the top of it, there's a prop. And so as it goes down and as it goes up, that prop spins freely. Honestly, it works as smooth. I was like, this will never work. It'll get stuck and jammed up. It does not. So that was really fun because the first time that I even cast it out, and I almost got frustrated with my pole. Why is my line not sinking? And it took me a whole 3 seconds to realize that it was a fish on the end of the line, and I set the hook and then there, you know, but when you can put those different pieces together and put different presentations together, that was a big piece of our weekend.
Yeah. So like Emily said, you know, towards the evening and even the next morning, you know, bug profiles were working a little bit better. I think Emily had mentioned something because even in the morning, the black flies were pretty bad by us. And she was like, well, where are all the dang dragonflies? Well, if you've been following any of us pan fishermen, you know, Ryan Slemmy, us, a few others, we're all noticing those dragonfly larvae coming up. And that's what's being fed on right now. There's a fall hatch coming, so we'll have that, you know, we'll have that September hatch of flies, and then it'll be done. So, you know, that kind of stuff is going on right now, and that's kind of fun. And then we went and trolled for a bit because we got sick of losing jigs on the crib because it started to get a little windy. So then we started trolling and we started out deeper because it was a little bit chillier, especially on Sunday. And yeah, didn't really work. And we kept moving in, and we got to 5 feet. And that's, you know, that's where we started running into these big clumps of weeds. And it was just really tough to keep your line in the water because a lot of these, they're not super slimy or gross, but they're just like really tough. And so it's hard to pull that stuff through. And Emily suggested, well, why don't we just like bobber the weed beds? You know, there's pockets. And so
Shallower.
So we went up into 4 feet of water and just started casting at weed bed, like holes in the weed beds. And lo and behold, started catching crappies, and they're up there. They just need with it being a little bit chillier, you know, the water temp between the 2 days probably varied about 3 to 5 degrees, depending on where we were at the lake. And you really did have to slow it down a lot on Sunday, and we caught some good fish. You had a nice 17-inch smallmouth, probably 3.5 pounds.
That was actually, yeah.
We caught a couple walleyes.
Yes.
Hey, Jim. And
Jim, yes, we did.
so it was
looked just like this.
So yeah, it was a kind of a fun multi tactic weekend. And yeah, overall, I feel like we saw a lot of boats come and a lot of boats leave. It was very fast and furious. But the weather was nice enough. We just kind of grounded out for the weekend and pulled some nice fish.
You know, this is kind of a side tangent to things, but it's what I'm thinking. So here you go. One of the things that we did find when we were trolling around, like Josh was mentioning earlier, is, to be honest, we went past a dock and there were people on it. And on this dock, there was, I don't know, dad, grandpa, whatever, teaching a young man, an adult, how to fly fish. And he was doing okay. You know, I mean, I'm sure he could have caught a fish, maybe really kind of fast, but it's moments like this. They were talking about going to streams and all that kind of stuff. But I really, when we were talking about slowing down that presentation, I mean, I think this time of the year, the key to finding those crappies, like Josh was saying, you know, cast out into those holes in the weeds. But sometimes those fish were like in the weeds, like where you cannot cast because your hook will not even sink, you know. And so if you were doing something like a fly presentation and it could float on top of those weed beds, that's where those fish were eating from. So if it was a bug, if it was a minnow, I think that bite was opportunistic in just what was in the right place at the right time for that fish. So we didn't fly fish, but to be honest, in my opinion, I think that could have been very successful this past weekend. Now, with a warm up coming this weekend, I mean, I guess that's the key, is where the fish going to be now.
Yeah. So, well, I'm getting distracted here. Jim says he has the 16th open. He doesn't. We are already going to go visit him. We booked it with him. We told him, we're bringing you fishing. We're showing you how to catch crappies, Jim.
Is that how this is going? I've seen Jim can catch a crappie or two. But I do remember, actually, this is a funny story to the people at home. One time, we all went fishing. Who remembers Nick Anderson? He's an ice junkie. And who else was there? Was it Jared or somebody? I can't remember. There was 4 people.
I think so.
And the reason that I'm telling the story is because Jim felt the need when we all stopped at Quick Trip or wherever we were, tried to put a banana in our boat to bad luck us or something. And you know what? Not only did we find that banana and Josh ate it, even though he hates bananas.
Hate bananas.
We caught the first fish.
Yeah. And
it was awesome. And lots of fish.
Yeah.
It was an awesome day. And it was all thanks to Jim putting a banana in our boat. So if I can find that picture still, I will come and post it on the comments of this video after we're done, because I can't do it right now, but it's pretty funny, to be honest.
Yeah. So, let's back up a little bit. So this
more bananas.
So we didn't have a show last week because we were kind of reeling from, no pun intended. We were kind of reeling from just being in Minnesota. And
okay, Scotty, I'm not gonna lie to you. I've tried, and maybe I'll put that picture here too. Some days when walleye fishing is tough, one day I put a worm and a leech, and it worked. I'm not even kidding you. So you never know. And I have tried a Swedish fish. I have tried a worm. I've tried a few other things, and I've not otherwise been successful.
So our vacation was out to western Minnesota. We went over to Lake Osakis for a week. We had only been on it once prior with our Razor team.
And it was ice fishing then, so this was different conditions.
Yeah. So we had never been on it in a boat, and we did okay, but it was interesting. So I grew up in Minnesota, in more of the South Central, we could call it.
Oh, my mom.
Hey, Barb. And but I went to school in Northwest Minnesota, so I'm not any stranger to the wind, but holy smokes, guys. I don't know if any of you from Minnesota remember a couple weeks ago, but like off of 94, like where Osakis is and Lake Osakis is, we had 30-mile-an-hour winds, like straight 30-mile-an-hour winds for 4 days. And it came from every direction. A different one each day. So one day we fished north wind, then south wind, then east, then west. It was nuts how much wind in every direction. So like we did get to fish most of the lake. It's, most of the spots in the lake, just couldn't fish them all in one day. You had to like find little pockets to ride in. And I think one of my favorites was towards the end of the week. We were going around and we were hiding from a south wind. Because it was blowing, we were on the North Shore and it was blowing right up. And so we were on just this little edge on the north side, and we were trolling, catching a few crappies. And we saw a local, because we saw him park his boat later, but we saw a local trying to sit out on this point, and he was catching some small bluegills, and
he was doing a good job being discreet.
Yeah. So, we don't normally take anybody's spots. We're just trolling. So then we turn around and we make another troll, and it
was a whole shoreline.
Yeah. And so then we turn around and we make another troll. It probably takes us an hour. And somewhere in that troll, he decided to leave. And we were like, well, let's see if we can catch some bluegills. So we actually turned the boat sideways and we just drifted, but we were vertical fishing. So we put on some super heavy tungsten. And from Widowmaker, the mega droppers, we put some down, put on some small bug plastics, and man, we were smoking bluegills, just drifting along. And it wasn't slow. It was like 0.8, 0.9.
Oh yeah, I thought you meant the catching rate. And
no, that wasn't slow either, but
the drift rate was also super fast. Yeah,
and that was super fun. There was some pretty decent size fish that we caught.
1 ounce weights, Jim. Yes, that is the size jig that I was using in these waves.
Yeah, but it made us, the rest of the week pretty much the same deal.
Wait. I want to go back to that because the other thing that was interesting about this, I don't know. I mean, this is worth talking about. This is a really cool thing. I feel like I learned from it because although I've drift fished before, I mean, there wasn't technically anything new, but I mean, I guess having to use that heavy of a jig was a little bit new due to the speed, because you did have to be down there. But I guess that was the other thing is this shoreline, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you had more graph than I did at this point, but
Okay.
I would say it was a little bit of a slower slope. And so what happened
Yep.
is it wasn't a wall, like a weed wall. Like sometimes when we troll, we say, look for that edge, look for that drop off line, and that's where you drive your boat along, and that's where you control for fish. And that's cool. But in this case, because it was that slower slope, the weed drop off was much slower. And so we were at the place where weeds were just starting to dwindle down and just starting to disperse. And so I would say the majority of the time we were not pulling through weeds because that would not be successful, but we were definitely having to hit the tops of those deeper weeds to find those bigger fish. And I think if we would have gone a little bit shallower, people were bobber fishing all over the place, and you can catch smaller fish around. But there are some quality bluegills that were on that deeper end of things. And it didn't seem to matter what you put down as far as profile. If it was that bigger bug profile or if it was a minnow. But I think in that case, with so many waves, it was the game of catch their eye.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a pretty fun bite. We did a little bit of vertical fishing out in 20 some feet of water. There was just some nice bluegills sitting out on a hump. It was 30 feet of water and then came up to 20 feet on top of this hill. Got to fish that a couple nights before we got pushed out of there by people. And yeah, it was.
I'm laughing. Josh says that's so smooth before we got pushed. Honestly, it was such a tough day because for 2 nights we tried to go out to the spot, and the first night, yeah, it was the first night. We did okay. It wasn't, we battled the waves, we got out there, and the thing was, it was pretty fun, but most other boats didn't brave it. We weren't unsafe. But then that next day, and I don't think we did quite as well. And so we were looking forward to come back on a calmer day. And when we finally had that, everybody was there already, and that was frustrating.
I mean, that's how it goes. It's a pretty busy lake, and if you hit a spot, people are going to notice. That won't go unnoticed. So
Well, and what did we do is exactly what we tell people on the show to do is, so what were the conditions? What were the depths? And we looked for other similar conditions. Now, the funny thing is we found some similar conditions where it just wasn't quite as deep around the sunken island. Didn't work out, and so you have to find those different keys. And then even if it is kind of a specific location, I don't know if we switched tactics or if we did find another spot. I mean, but we did get to do other fishing and it was fine.
Yeah. So overall, caught a bunch of fish, had a fish fry, hung out with the family. That's about it.
I was waiting to see what else you were going to say. I don't know. I didn't know what I expected you to say. I guess, as far as going with your family, for the people at home that don't know, we always used to take a trip to kind of northern Minnesota, and we have since kind of traveled around to a few different places, and I think we're kind of testing the waters to see where we end up. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because let's say that you or your family or your friends or whoever have a favorite resort that you guys love going to. Put that in the comments because I am interested and I am looking up vacation spots. So not that I'm going to drag the whole family all around the world, but bonus points if it's in like eastern Minnesota or like western Wisconsin. I mean, I guess that's like pretty specific, but there's quite a few cool places out there. And so if you know one of them, let us know.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to keep, I don't know if it's rambling necessarily, but rambling because I just, I've been trying to text Brad. So we'll see if we talked to him on Monday and he said the bite's been really good. So he could have just lost track of time.
Stuck with the clients.
So, or
who knows?
Yeah, stuck with the clients. So yeah. So if we get a hold of him, we'll get him on here. But if not, you get to hang out with us. Oh, and look at all those numbers just drop. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
I'm just kidding.
no. He's fishing.
Yeah,
I bet he is
he is
fishing.
fishing.
And actually, if he does join us tonight or a different night, he posted a really cool video. I was going to ask him about it. Maybe it was even a reels. So does that disappear? Can you look that back up? But it was with his son. I think it's his son. A pretty little kid. And what this video was is describing what's on the graph. So they were driving around, they were looking for fish. And even as a tiny child, he was able to point out, what was a fish or maybe what wasn't, if they think that they should stop and fish them. So, I mean, that was a really cool thing and a really great story to share. And, I think about this a lot because we were on vacation, like we were talking about, and, we were saying we were there with family. And so I think there's a lot of different ways to get family out there. And so for him, it was a graph. At this resort that we were at, there was a dock that everybody ended up on, and that was pretty funny. But lots of different opportunities when it's warm weather to get people out on the water.
Mm-hmm. I don't know where you were going.
I don't know where I was going with that either. I just like that video, and I go and look it up. Jim said he was fishing and made me think of it, so I'm wishing I was fishing, I guess. So that's, I don't know what else. Yeah. We are coming into fall though, and I jokingly asked you before, it's going to heat up, so where are the fish? But I think that is kind of a real question, because we did have this cold front and some fish started pushing out, but with this heat coming back, I guess I have an opinion. Do you have an opinion on where fish are going to be?
I think it's mostly going to be just spread out. I think that there's going to be some up shallow and there's going to be some on, mid depth structure. I think one thing that we're going to notice, despite the water temperatures being warm, is that you are going to be able to start upsizing your baits. Just because the amount of daylight is decreasing rapidly. And that's a huge indicator for most things in nature, be it plants or animals. You just start feeling like it's fall. Even if it's 90 degrees, you come home and it's dark by 7 o'clock and then it's dark by 6:45. And then you're like, holy smokes, I got to get some stuff done. Everything kind of gets that feeling. So I think you're going to be able to start using some larger baits.
Well, and that's actually something that we have kind of started doing as the summer has dwindled on into fall here. And I can't say that this is true for every lake, but we fish a lake that's, big enough that there is a decent walleye bite. There's some smallies in there. There's, bluegills, crappies, all kinds of great fish. But when you talk about upsizing bait, we're saying, if you're putting a twisty tail on, like a 2-inch twisty tail, at this point in the year, you will get almost any of those species to bite. And so the other thing that I think about, I feel like I'm giving you my secret saying this. It's not a secret. It's not a secret, but I think especially this time of year when fish are, can I say, staging to go deep, I think they know that, cold weather's coming and they've got that mindset, start eating and they're going to push out deep. Where I'm going with this is I think fish often, we say like fish peninsulas or points or, and fish, that's where they go out deep. They follow those contours out into that deep water. And so, but I would also say crappies are there. I would say that smallies are there. I would say that walleyes could be there. If there's rocks on that point, you're talking about upsizing your bait and the opportunity for a multi-species day. I mean, it's great to go out and target one of those kinds of fish, but who's going to bulk at a good hook set,
Yeah. So, I mean, you can kind of see it happening all over YouTube. I don't know how many of you watch a bunch of fishing channels. Emily and I watch a bunch of fishing channels. We have a lot of friends out there in the social media space, and we like to kind of keep up with what they're doing. And one of the things right now is as far as the walleye sphere goes, the snap jigging is starting to become the thing now. That's the end of summer, transition into fall type thing. You're gonna, a lot of the bait fish are getting a little bit bigger so they can venture out a little bit further out of the weeds. You're seeing a lot of bait balls that are out in that 15 to 20 feet. And that's where some of your bigger fish are gonna hang out. Our friend Clayton, he just posted a video about casting for big pike, and he's fishing he called it shallow water, but what was it, like 8-10 feet? For us that
It's
tends
like
to be
medium water.
yeah, but he's fishing that with fishing those really short weed mats, the weed mats that come 2 feet or 3 feet off the bottom, and he's just throwing big swim baits over those big weed flats like that and catching some big pike. Tom Boley was out there. He was snap jigging walleyes off of those points between 15-20 feet of water. When you got gravel or rocks or even like a hard sand bank would be good places to start. And I don't think we've ever professed that we're against forward facing sonar. I think we just don't have it. And so for those of us that don't have it, you just have to be proficient at either taking notes or remembering what times a year are good for what, and keep those places in mind as the season goes on. And so like this time of year, we don't have to have forward facing sonar to tell us that there's going to be fish on this rock point, because there's going to be. They've been there. You just have to go out there and cast, and sometimes they bite it and sometimes they don't. And if you have forward facing sonar, you're lucky enough to see if there's even fish there. So that's I guess that's where I was kind of going with that, is that we got that kind of starting, and that's kind of where that big bait profile came into play. Was
Well, I like when you're talking about, graph and sonar and, all the different ways of detecting fish, because, when you look at the fishing world and especially YouTube, it is easy to assume that just like everybody in the world has a forward facing live unit. It just feels like that's how everyone fishes these days. And as far as the average angler, it could not be farther from the truth at this point. So even if that is the direction of where things are going, right or wrong or whatever you believe, if that's the direction of where things are going, that is what it is. If you are one of the people who does not have a unit like that, though, this is the other thing that we did this weekend that we almost hesitate to bring up because it's like boring, but it's so important because, we took our graphs, and first of all, we have, what do you call the live mapping?
Auto charting.
Yeah,
but
auto-charting.
there's so Humminbird has auto charting. I think it's called Live Map or something with Lowrance. I'm sure Garmin has their own. There's just being able to map with your fishing equipment has been something that I feel like it was like a big thing for like a year, and then all of a sudden, like,
Nobody was doing it.
well, not that nobody was doing it, just kind of lost its novelty. But it's an extremely powerful tool that I believe is underutilized. And I say that because I never see anybody just driving back in just mapping. I never see that. So
but part of the reason that I bring this up is because as we're driving around and we're doing this mapping, first of all, there's a lot of lakes out there where the most recent map was made in like 1965. And it's like, that's like a really long time ago at this point. And it's like great to have a basis because to some extent there's some truth in that. That lake doesn't change maybe all that much, but sometimes it does, especially if you're on a flowage system, especially if there's, a river or stream that pushes things around. Even just a regular lake, it's amazing how much that can change. And so first of all, to have that updated map, there's maybe humps that people didn't know about. There's maybe like deep holes that people didn't know about or whatever that is. That's all useful data that we are able to look back on. However, this is a multi-purpose activity also because as we're driving along and you are using that side imaging and you are able to see a lot of times the cribs that are out there. Or different sunken things or a rock or gravel or, and so you can make these notes along the way. And so I like when you're talking about, referencing where these fish are so you can find those patterns and, fish it year to year. But the other thing is that this is the time to also be preparing for other parts of the year. So you're going to start hearing people talk about like, preparing for ice season and find all those deep golden spots. And it's like, I'm sure none of our listeners, because you guys are all great fishermen, that's how this goes. But there's like people out on Facebook that just expect like every crib to be like documented or mapped somewhere that you can just like reference and find if you like search hard enough or something. I mean, I don't know. They just assume all that's out there and it's not. Like so often, like right or wrong, communities or individuals on lakes put things out there. Sometimes it's a DNR piece, sometimes it is marked on a map, sometimes it's DNR and not on a map. I mean, there's so many different things, but I mean, as far as going out and doing the work and finding these things, it sounds stupid to say, but they don't find themselves. And so sometimes this does just take that commitment of getting to know that local lake. And it's funny because then you're watching everyone else like driving around and like fishing, and you're like, in the deep spot where fish aren't right now. But when you have that data to look back when those fish are there, then that is pretty cool.
Well, and going back to you talking about lakes changing, a first-hand account of mine, we use the we use the auto chart software at work, and we do, we have 5 lakes that we take care of out of my office, and one of them in the last 3 years has risen 6 feet and then dropped that 6 feet. And you say that and it's like, oh, it's 6 feet, but then you like go out there and look and there's like, yeah, it's like 6 feet. That's there's
like
trees.
People's boathouses are underwater.
Yeah, there was like trees and docks and stuff that we were fishing 2 years ago that now have dry land under them. So, it does change that much in some bodies of water. And going back to the cribs and stuff like that stuff is not permanent. It's semi-permanent. And so somebody that could be fishing cribs, they'd be like, oh, well, this is a crib that my grandpa put in or whatever. My dad put one in and it was super great. And now this lake is junk because this spot, we used to slay them here. Now we don't catch anything. Well, if you take an aqua view, or if you're using your side imaging during the or side or down imaging during the summertime while you're mapping, you'd see that crib is flat. There's nothing there. You might be able to see a faint outline of a square where one used to be sitting.
Or where the lumber is like falling over or whatever.
But it's just not a good structure anymore. And so those types of things do change. And even if they are marked on maps, they might not be there. We've run into that instance on the Chippewa Flowage. You can get lots of maps that say there's cribs out there, and you go out there and look, and unless you know what you're looking for on your map, you'd never even know there was a crib there. And sometimes though, you'll be surprised because you're like, why are fish sitting here? And then you're like going over it, and you turn your side imaging on and you see a faint outline of just like a square. And it's like, I don't know why they're sitting on top of that old crib, but they like that spot. So whatever, but it's not always like that. So
it's not always like that. Actually, speaking of, it's not always like that. I mean, I guess you were talking about the lakes rising and lowering, and that's another really great tip. Actually, is one of my favorite places to fish. I guess like randomly is all the places where people say, "Oh, that's overfished. That's out. That had a huge die off, a kill off. Whatever." No oxygen and all the fish died. People say it in all kinds of different ways. And I mean, sometimes that is totally true. Sometimes there is truth to that. Sometimes something happens to a body of water and who knows. But by and large, in my experience, if something happens, well, I guess even let's back up and I'll even say this, especially after winter on most bodies of water, there's a certain number of fish that are just going to be dead. When the water's open and eagles can eat the fish and all of that, you see less dead fish. I don't know, but in winter and the ice melts and sometimes they're there. I mean, pike don't eat them all. But that's the thing is then people assume the whole lake is dead. And if that lake is getting that rest, if it's one season, if it's 5 years, you never know how long people get in their head. I'm not going to go there. That's a bad spot. When the culture of that lake is don't go there, it gives it that break. And sometimes you can find really phenomenal fish. So I love when I talk to people in the community and they're like, well, don't go there. And I'm like, perfect. So, I mean, I guess, like I said, it's not always that easy. And sometimes somebody has great information, but to go in those places, I mean, sometimes we've just found places where the fishing was tough, but if you can find a map, they are there.
Yeah. And I mean, if you do your research before you go out and you look at some DNR numbers, no matter what state you're in. There's some type of fish report. And even if it's just as much as, well, there is these types of fish in there. If it's listed, it's probably in there, and there's probably some other fish that aren't listed in there because somebody decided that they wanted them in there, which is illegal, by the way. And if you go there and you don't catch anything, it's worth going back a couple times because every day can be different. We've, one of our favorite lakes, we don't, we fish, we put in enough hours on the weekend where it's hard for us to get skunked. You just like put on the smallest thing you have, or you put on something that anything will eat and you'll catch a small little perch. And that is enough to just like take the zero off the scoreboard. But if you're persistent enough, you can find fish. It's just about knowing your body of water.
I don't know if I'm always settled with a 2-inch perch. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, you get crappy.
Because I know we can do better. Come on, fish, you can do better. That's whatever. Oh my gosh. Well, what else?
Well, I guess my only other thought, I haven't heard from Brad, so we might cut this short a little bit, but it's
so if you
August.
have a question, put it in the comment. We'll talk about that, but otherwise.
Yeah, we'll talk about anything right now, but
not anything.
Almost anything. But it's August 31st, which means that this weekend is Labor Day weekend.
Dun, dun, dun.
You know what that means?
Not even I do.
End of the summer. And that means that Vexilars are coming out of their hidey holes. Augers are getting charged or tuned up. Sleds are getting gone through. Mouse holes are getting patched.
We better
Hopefully
not.
Yeah. All that good stuff is happening, and
we should maybe take people on a tour of a garage.
Yeah, maybe someday
in a video.
Not right now. But
not tonight.
But everybody should be looking at their calendars because there's lots of great shows coming up. But one in particular, and I bet the 4 of you that are watching live right now probably know this already, but it's the Wisconsin Ice Fishing Expo that we're super excited about. It's the first annual one. You can only go to the first one once, right? So we only have one first Wisconsin Ice Fishing Expo. So that's going to be a great time. We're gonna be coming off of St. Paul the weekend before, so we're gonna be like super jazzed up because St. Paul's great. It has a lot of the big names. There's some good seminars there. There's big ice castles, lots of flashy things. We're gonna come back to Wisconsin and we're gonna get into the some of that stuff, but we're gonna get into the super cool like mom and pop. Things you can't
hear about online,
right? Some of the things you can't even get in a store yet unless you make it popular at these shows. So it's gonna be a great time. We're gonna have all kinds of stuff there. Our friend Ryan Slemmy and all of our Ice Junkie teammates. They're all gonna run the awesome kids zone. As well as like just helping around the show. So that's going to be awesome. It's going to be every time that group shows up and we're hanging out with them, it's always been an awesome, fun party. So that's going to be great. We have Tom Boley coming out. We have Brian Brosdahl coming out. We have Larry Smith, I think, is coming out. We got a bunch of other great seminars too. If you ask enough, maybe you get to hear from us and hear some of our ice fishing tactics.
They don't want to. They already hear from us every week.
Yeah, you guys don't want to hear us talk at a seminar. No, it's going to be awesome. We have a lot of people that we work with. Striker and Otter and Razor and Aquaview and all those cool cats will be there as well as Eskimo, Clam.
Widowmaker,
Amp
Outdoors, I think deep freeze. There's like a million Acme.
Yeah.
If you go to icefishexpo.com, right? That's there's like literally a map that you can like walk through the convention center.
It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be awesome. So put that on your calendar. But
second weekend in December.
Yep, second weekend in December. And after you mark that down as a must go, then go check out all the other ones because they're starting to put out their dates. And those are always a good time if you haven't been out to the Sioux Falls show.
They've grown every year.
Todd puts on a great show out there. St. Paul's always a decent one to go to. It's kind of in the middle between Wisconsin and Minnesota. One that we've never been to that I hear a lot of great things about, Duluth. And unfortunately, it's the same weekend as the Wisconsin Ice Fishing
We're never going to
Expo.
get there.
Never going to get there. So.
That's okay. We'll have mini donuts.
Per request.
I hope.
I hope. We will have food trucks, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's going to be awesome.
I'm sure we'll bring more about expos coming up.
Oh, Eric.
That is how I feel. Is like, I mean, that's the thing is the evenings right now are getting cool. This might be our last evening because then we have our heat blast that's coming. But I mean, I think we're getting cool weather again right after that. So, I mean, we are thinking ice too.
Yep.
The fish are too. Water temps are above 70. They're hot.
Well, I'll probably go dump this in the lake. Has some ice in it.
I'm going to finish my old fashioned first. Put blueberries in it because we picked them.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Anyways, I don't know. That's all I had to talk about tonight because, to be honest, we didn't even plan any of that. So,
nope.
I mean, that was awesome. And that's kind of where we have been at with fishing recently. I'm sure this weekend there will be something a little bit different. And then we'll talk about that again next week.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do we know who we're talking about? But I don't know if we've confirmed that finally, but we have a few fun guests lined up. So as always, if you have anybody in mind that you would like us to talk to, drop that in the comments. We'll definitely talk to them. Otherwise, more to come about fishing and expos and all that kind of good stuff. And as always, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to offer a sincere apology. It's always, we get a hold of these people and they're very busy. Like they take the time out to come and talk with us, and sometimes it just doesn't work out.
When you're a guide and a business owner and a fisherman and a family,
guy, yeah.
And all around awesome, all in one.
We apologize. We'll get him on here eventually because he has some sweet stuff with ice camp over on Mille Lacs that we're gonna have to talk about.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about ice fishing, so that's more to come for sure.
Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say.
Then no, that's perfect. Now I just want to talk about ice. Let's stay and talk about ice fishing. No, but we do have plenty of that coming up.
Yeah.
And so if you are excited to, make sure that you're joining us in these next few weeks. And as for this evening, thanks for joining us for the night fight.
Night, everybody.